So, switching hats, we're now going into another panel discussion. I'll just introduce the panel members. This is all focused around customer experience and customer needs. What I'd like to do first of all is introduce Richard Kimber. So Richard, do you want to come on up, Richard? Richard's the founder of daisee, which he founded in 2017. I'll read from you the vision and mission of daisee, which is to create a world-leading AI software company offering significant value to clients by blending commercial best practice and data science to create intelligent products that learn and adapt. So Richard has over 25 years of global leadership experience that includes several chief executive and board roles spanning marketing, social media, and capital markets. So thanks to Richard. If you want to give a round of applause, please. Next, we've got Barney Pierce from Cover Genius. Come on up, please, Barney. Barney is the Senior Vice President, Strategies, Partnerships across APAC. And Cover Genius, in case you hadn't heard of them, the Insurtech for embedded insurance that protects the global customers of the world's largest digital companies, including Booking Holdings and Intuit. And X-Cover is also available on Amazon, eBay, and Shopee. So in his role, Barney is responsible for building strategic partnerships and helping launch new markets, lines of business for Cover Genius in APAC, in the APAC region, across a number of different verticals: retail, logistics, travel, fintech, property, and business services. Barney's fairly new to insurance and has a whole wealth of experience actually gained at Google. So he obviously knows a lot about customers and is applying that into insurance. So round of applause for Barney, please. And last but not least, Zoe Cossart. So if you'd like to come up. Thank you. So Zoe's General Manager of Revenue at Open, which is the Insurtech providing technology, sales, and claims services to deliver car, home, and travel insurance offerings to customers of the world's largest and fastest growing brands. Huddle Insurance, who you've probably heard of, is also part of the Open universe, being the direct-to-customer brand. So Zoe's background is over 10 years leading strategic program delivery across consulting, technology, and insurance innovation. So round of applause, please, for Zoe. So we've got a bit of an Insurtech powerhouse, I think, on the stage. Let's get into some questions. What we will do is progressively allow you to talk a bit more about each of your businesses and what they're doing. But before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about what we think customers need and how they view how well the insurance industry is doing in delivering those needs. And I put up a bit of a point of view on some of that at the beginning of the last presentation in terms of some of the new and emerging personas that we can see and the needs that we think they're driving. But I might start with yourself, Zoe. What do you think customers need, and how well are they perceiving the insurance industry delivering on those?
It's a big question. Obviously, it relates to so many components. I think James made a good point before when he was talking about the guts of insurance. I think that there's so many elements in terms of the experience, whether it's the expectations, how are they comparing to e-commerce, to the other experiences that they're having across their days. But then there's also the point of difference in terms of claims and that experience. As we know at the moment, we're seeing a lot more perils, we're seeing a lot more instances of people claiming they've never claimed before. That's creating interesting experiences in terms of what does the customer expect. You know, some of these customers have held policies for 20 years and never actually exercised their right to claim. So I think in terms of what is building out what we're seeing, it's both in terms of the human interaction, the digital interaction, and facilitating both and both well. And I think what Cover Genius is obviously doing really well as well is around that point of sale that you're referring to. So each and every moment, whether it be the biggest asset or a really exciting holiday, that we're there for them, that they understand clear and concisely what they're getting and what they're expecting from either a claims or a purchase experience, and then how they're able to interact with that policy. What are the extensions? How can they make that fit and purposeful for them?
Great. Same question to you, Barney. Please.
Yeah, I mean, so I've obviously been in the insurance space for about 6 months after 15 years with Google, so these are my early observations, I would say. But across most categories, I'd say the experience is pretty average. And a couple of things. We did a research, a global study into travel insurance recently, And some of the data we got back from that was really not strong, in the sense that, you know, where customers were sourcing travel insurance from traditional sources like credit cards, the NPS scores were like minus 34, you know. And we did another one in the property tech, prop tech kind of space for property kind of insurance, and it was minus 3. So, you know, I think there's firstly a lot of room for improvement, clearly, but actually this is kind of why I got into the Insurtech space in the first place, with so much opportunity to improve the customer experience. I think that just presents a great play for Insurtechs. And so, you know, I think there's upside, that's for sure.
Yeah. Richard, your views, please.
Sure. I think you had a great slide earlier where at the front of it you put down around the complexity of the insurance proposition. And I think from what we've seen across the spectrum in insurance businesses, there's a lot of complexity to deal with. And I think historically insurance companies, you know, have used actuarial science and so on to look at, you know, probabilities and so on. I think what we're seeing now is the opportunity for Insurtechs to really modernise how data is treated within the insurance industry. And I think from a customer experience perspective, I think the biggest challenge for insurance companies is to make it consistent. And I think particularly when it comes to voice interaction, what we find is that whenever there's a complex interaction, it tends to go away from the digital channels back to voice. And voice obviously is where the rubber hits the road. You're then speaking to an agent, that agent's dealing with a client who may be suffering hardship or is vulnerable. There's a lot of complexity in the product. And I think from that perspective, it's then being able to deliver a very consistent service, a high level of service, and one that's going to stay within the bounds of the regulation. And we're not seeing any less regulation in the industry. And I think all of that continues to add to the complexity of what an insurance business needs to provide.
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? I mean, because regulation ultimately was there to do a few things, but one of the things it's there to do is benefit and protect the customer, and yet a lot of insurers find it as a burden that needs to be dealt with, which is a bit separate from a customer lens. So, I mean, so I think regulation makes things hard. What are some of the other barriers? Like, why is it so hard to get this right in insurance? And maybe you can talk about some of the things you're doing at daisee, Richard, that start to move the needle a bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what makes it difficult, I think, is a number of the broader factors around technology, the complexity of the product, the training that needs to go into providing compliant services. And I think for the insurance company as well is having the right control systems to ensure that you are compliant and that you're operating with the correct amount of legislation and actually checks and balances around that delivery. I think the other piece to it is also understanding how you can innovate within the framework of legislation. And I think one of the areas that we've seen specifically in the last 12 months, it's been a big area of focus, is RG271, which has been the area of complaints. And I think complaints have really been, you know, I guess an area that people have dealt with reluctantly, but the new regulation require you to actually be proactive around actually identifying complaints before they happen. And the only way that you can do that is with systems and technology. It's very difficult to do that on a manual basis. And often what we've seen is that insurance companies have then had, you know, very large fines or interventions from regulators after the fact, and by then it's obviously way too late. And from a customer perspective, you know, customers don't want to go through the escalation processes to actually get into a complaint scenario because it's a lot of time, effort, money, and stress.
Maybe there's an Insurtech opportunity there for proactive complaints.
Yeah, there is. I mean, absolutely. I mean, without doing a shameless plug, I would do a quick one, which was that you know, we have built a predictor based on the voice interaction, and it's a very complex area. But we've got a very strong partnership with the General Insurer in Queensland that we've developed with it together. And from that, we've been able to predict the likelihood of a complaint far more accurately than they can with any other system.
Great. So Barney, maybe some of the things that you're doing at CoverGenius that start to improve customer experience and again, move the needle.
Yeah, I think for us, you know, the first thing that we really try and do is understand the partners that we work with, the kind of customers there are, the data that they have, the user flows, and then we design insurance and protection solutions that fit that particular use case. And because of that, you know, it obviously means you come up with much more customized policies that fit that particular experience. And they've got such great, rich data. I mean, these ecosystems that we work with know more about the customer than anyone else. And they're also really trusted brands. So for me, that's a huge part of it, is really just focusing on the customer, right? Who are they? What does that experience look like? And what is that journey going to be? And then we work backwards. And obviously what we've seen in insurance, from my short experience in there, is we have products and then we try and find places to distribute them. And we've tried to re-engineer that and think about the consumers, the ecosystems they're in, and find protection solutions for that particular experience. And that just leads to a very different solution designing.
Yeah. And do you think Insurtech, maybe for you, Zoe, Insurtech's are better able to do that just because of their start point and the lack of legacy and different ways of thinking about it in the past?
Yes, and.
Yes.
So I definitely think we are very much well equipped and well placed to do that, and I think that we do that and do it regularly. I think we are very fortunate to have the likes of Allianz and Hollard who back us for underwriting in terms of being that North Star in terms of things that we need to do consistently and make sure that we actually have a lot of those compliance pieces in place. I think that we're fortunate that to some extent that can be a 1.1 consideration, with the one consideration being the customer.
Yep.
I think personally one of my favourite things is, I think anyone that works in the insurance industry knows it's a relatively tight group, and usually it's people moving between insurers and different financial services. I think one of the coolest things is when we actually get in someone that's from outside the industry and we ask them to do something and they're like, what does that mean? We're like, great, tell us more about that. What don't you understand? How can we unpack that? How can we make that more clear? And recently that happened for us actually in our partnerships team. And it's been fantastic because we've literally been like, go through every single flow, write down every single question that you have, tell us as if this is the largest purchase that you're going to make and you want to protect that asset. What are you caring about? What matters? And what do you need to have more information on? So I think they're the types of opportunities. We obviously do a lot of customer testing, but I think as most would know and feel, customers, when you're doing testing, it's something that they talk about, but sometimes a different outcome when they're actually doing it. So I think actually having that type of perspective is really helpful. But I also completely echo the point around actually just knowing your customer base, the partners, who they're actually trying to serve, even down to the demographic and what you can learn about in terms of their expectations. So I think like from a brand piece, our huddle base is a very different beast to navigate and to prepare experiences for in contrast to, say, a Bupa. They have very different expectations, and I think actually being able to understand that and then build at pace, and I think that's an element of like the great opportunity, but it's also a responsibility, because we can make decisions and we can introduce things quickly, actually making that make sense and be something that customers are actually understanding if they're entering a journey on day 1 versus day 10 versus day 106 when it's a brand new quote again.
Do you have an example of a sort of nugget of insight that you've found through that kind of process and what you implemented to deliver it?
Yeah, sure. So some basic things, I think, like around the fact that like a Huddle customer, for example, so for anyone that doesn't know Huddle, it's more of a cost-conscious customer. We sell a lot of policies through aggregators. That's a key direct channel for us. And then we have Bupa, who's a partner. Their key goal is around retention, so the focus is a lot of the member base, the PHI base. So when you look at kind of the age demographics, you can kind of draw some conclusions, but in terms of the actual experiences that we need to generate, they're quite different. So we will facilitate a more human-orientated interaction when it comes to a Bupa customer, whereas it will be far more digital, fast claims, the way that we communicate around the benefits of the actual policy, orientated around the customer group that we're serving. Great,
thanks. So, I mean, how important do you think a seamless experience it is across channels and across different stages of the insurance life cycle? You're probably only as strong as your weakest point, is the theory, perhaps.
You know, it's a pretty simple thing to say, but it's one of the most important things. And time again, from the research we do and from our experience, the reason why embedded insurance has been working so well is convenience, like providing a convenient experience. And I mean, it's a consistent thing across industries. So if you can provide a relevant offer that's customized at the right time, and you can provide a seamless end-to-end experience. That means right through to the claims journey. That's absolutely critical, and that's really what's helping drive a lot of solid NPS scores and good feedback in creating. That's not easy to do, of course, from a technology point of view, so you need good data and technology to do that. But convenience, time and time again, comes back as the number one reason.
Yeah, and you're as focused on delivering that in the claims process as you are in the upfront sales process.
That's right. Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, from our point of view, we try and make sure that experience is end-to-end, including claims, and even embedded the claims experience into our partners' websites, but also manage claims across multiple products so that we can have a consistent customer experience for them, even though the underwriters or the insurance, there might be a few different players there as well.
Yeah. And Richard, your views on that?
Yeah, I echo that as well. I think it is important to have that consistency across channel. I think it is easier to say than it is to do. I think the other thing about it is it gets back to some of the insight that EY was showing around the different cohorts. I think one size doesn't always fit all. And I think what we've seen certainly across the insurance companies we work with is there's a very different segment approach across them, so they don't always target the same segments as I was mentioning before. Sometimes it's all about fast and expediency, and other times it's much more around hold my hand and give me that thorough experience. So there isn't a consistent single approach across customers, and I think that's where the complexity comes through again. So in terms of understanding the appropriate responses, and certainly what we see with our technology, it then comes back to understanding the soft skills that you require. And I think that's something that's very difficult to deliver in digital channels, but easy to deliver in human channels in theory. Again, in practice, it's quite difficult. So, it is a highly charged product area in terms of, it is a complex area. It's often, something that's quite important in terms of people's experience, but particularly when you get into the claims phase. And we see a lot of emphasis now in terms of companies focusing on their claims journey. It's often multiple calls, multiple interactions. It's not often, it's certainly not one simple interaction to get to the outcome. And I think that's where, certainly things like the building insurance, building repairs and that sort of stuff, that can, if you've been captured in a flood or a storm or whatever, that can take months or years to get sorted out. So, I think what we've seen is, an increase in that sort of friction around that area, certainly in the claims phase.
Yeah, I mean, we all know customer experience is important, but anyone have any thoughts on the consequences of the impact of not getting this right? Any real life examples there?
I mean, there's lots. So obviously, when it goes wrong, it can go really, really wrong. And I think there's been significant fines from complaints where the customer experience hasn't been good. And so there's been a number of insurance companies fined in Australia, and I think the regulators obviously stepping up the intensity around the penalties. But obviously that's not really that helpful to the individuals involved. So there are a number of areas where claims haven't been paid on time, customers have suffered, they've been disadvantaged, and so there's a number of those issues that have been surfaced over the last couple of years.
Yep.
So during the pandemic, customers were getting things like travel insurance and expecting, COVID-related things packaged up. But again, back to some of the research we were doing, 20% of those customers had their claims denied. And that's quite a lot, of customers taking up travel insurance when they specifically would have got it to cover them on COVID-related. I mean, those sort of things don't do the industry any favors, right? So it's that kind of stuff not being there at the time when they most need it, and it's happening quite a lot. That's where we get the worst feedback.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting element too to kind of consider in terms of both elements, the partner, the customer, and the business, right? And so when we're talking about cost to acquire being relatively high, there's a lot of in-market campaigns. We obviously want to retain the customers that we're actually getting in the door as well, and particularly when it's not a one-off purchase, but it's something that is a home or asset, obviously far more relevant for our business, but something where we actually need to make sure that at each interaction, and we're more likely to interact with them at renewal than we are with claim, we need to be understanding what that experience is. And I have personally listened to a few calls this week where it's been like, because of the different pricing considerations that have gone through, and hearing that backlash in terms of, oh, Suncorp did this to me last year, you're going to do it to me this year, I'll just go somewhere else. And that's something that we kind of need to think about as a genuine industry, about how we're actually talking to those changes. Customers conceptually understand that, you know, prices go up, there's been some storms, but it hasn't been in my area. You know, there's always going to be that challenge in terms of how do we actually advocate for consideration for customers and their understanding, but also how do we actually take them along on that journey? When are we contacting them? How are we contacting them? Is it simply just a letter of, hi, your premium's going up, please stay with us, thanks so much? Or is actually more insights and relevance? Is there more proactive maintenance? What else can we be doing? What other value can we be adding to their policies and to their experiences with their insurer to make sure that we're actually retaining those customers and we're not just blowing out a business model that's based on some unit economics that don't stand up anymore, and also so that we're actually maintaining that element of the industry when it is such a vital consideration in such a pressured time for customers when everything's going up and we're just adding to that list.
I think it's almost sort of thinking about that, and it was a bit like some of the things I talked about in the Nationwide Spire example. There's almost a bit of a paradox. So consumers want quick and easy, fast, convenient processes, but they want transparency and want to understand products and what they're getting, what they're not getting. So those two things don't necessarily fit very well together.
Agreed. One of our founders always says that there has to be that right level of friction, and I think that is so important because it needs to be a seamless experience with just the right amount of friction so that they actually understand. They, being customers, understand the exact specifics of when they're going to be covered, how they're going to be interacted with, and what that journey looks like. Even down to an auto renewal process. I mean, that's seamless, right? We're talking about some basic stuff here, but customers and their expectation of how that actually plays out is vital to make sure that we're actually communicating in a clear and concise way. But the sentiment work that I think that daisee does is really interesting, and I think that is going to lead us in the direction as to what customers are actually responding to and what they're positively and negatively reacting to.
Well, that's a great tee up for Richard to talk to us about what he's doing on that at daisee.
Yeah, definitely. And I think understanding the sentiment in the call is critical. So it's not only the sentiment in terms of how you're feeling about things, but the genuine understanding of what's been said. And I think there's a lot of jargon and terminology in insurance products. And, you know, I think simplifying that, making it clear, and using plain English is, you know, obviously important tools. But I think in terms of understanding that communication, there's so much to it that's beyond just pure sentiment, happiness or sadness. It's NPS. Was the call effective? The first call resolution stats. And I think, you know, talking about the underwriting experience, you know, we look at things like the propensity to churn. So actually, you know, is this client is going to stay with you on the longer haul, or are they just shopping around, and are they going to just continuously go through different insurance companies? So, you know, I think ultimately you do want to have that cross-sell, the broader relationship with clients, and understanding, you know, what is it consistent between the clients that stick with you versus the ones that churn. You know, those are the kind of insights that we're working on. So it's really getting to a granular level, not just taking averages, but actually looking at very specific indicators, markers and predictors. And I think that's where things like machine learning and AI are really being used in insurance, is looking at the prediction element. What's going to happen, not just what just happened.
And then it's doing something about it. So it's one thing to identify the trigger or the signal, but then it's another thing to be able to recognise that at the right time in the right interaction and then do something about it.
Exactly. And I think that's the next step, is then saying, okay, what is the next order of action, the next best action, the intervention, the nudge? What are we going to do? And that system, you know, requires more than just some technology. It requires a lot more process thinking and reinvention, because often companies aren't set up to do that. They're just looking to get through the calls and literally just, you know, keep that average speed of answer down, rather than actually thinking about how are we actually going to get to the right outcome for the client.
Yep. Last topic before we open up to questions from the audience. When we sort of rehearsed for this, we talked another trend that we talked about, and the benefits or potential limitations of that was bundling and unbundling of products, which is probably something that's happening more as time progresses. I think you had a perspective on that, Zoe, in terms of cognitive load on consumers and how they might deal with that. So it might suit some to pick and choose what they want to cover. Others don't want to do that and want to have some peace of mind that they're covered without having to make those choices. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we do a fair amount of customer testing periodically on, and I think, again, will be a very different potential viewpoint that we'll have, because, again, we're focused on car, home and travel, so the larger size purchases and considerations, whereas I can imagine some nuances, but we'll discover that. So I think in terms of our core offerings, it's definitely something that we understand that customers typically want choices over, but they want to feel like they have a choice while being given their best option. So it genuinely is down to, and for us, for majority of our business at this point, those interactions are digital. So it's about how we actually present that in a consumable fashion and generate that feeling of having choice while being guided as to what is likely the best choice for them, with compliance with all the different advice models. So I think it's important that we have that overlay in consideration. But in terms of where I think that we see the most opportunity is likely travel. And I'll let you elaborate more into this space. But I think like for travel, it's definitely an opportunity for us to break down those different components that are of interest, particularly customers who have never bought travel insurance before buying it now because of the COVID states. There's still 50-something countries that require travel insurance to enter. That's a consideration. And what are we seeing? Is it the delays? Is it lost baggage? And we can start to understand that, pick those things apart and actually make what can be a very expensive premium usable and valuable. And that will obviously have positive impacts on our other product sets and on their overarching experience with insurance as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're going to say the same thing, but I don't think it provides, if it's done well, extra cognitive load. And I think, from my perspective, some of the ways we've got around that is you might offer a very comprehensive sort of bells and whistles package type thing. And then as a second choice, if they opt out of that, you may offer, a more unbundled package so you can tailor that particular option, whether it be a medical coverage or baggage protection. So at least you get a second chance of actually customizing and tailoring. So if you do it that way, I think it's pretty seamless. The one time where there is sort of if there's multiple insurance offers and they're the same kinds of policies and they're trying to compare against one another on the price and the different jargons and the policies, that's where we see it becoming choice paralysis and an overload.
Yeah.
So, we've gone with the option and the model of largely trying to, as I said before, design policies for that particular experience, but not multiple policies. You might just unbundle or bundle a specific policy to customize that. That's how we can provide choice, not the same thing across 4 or 5 different underwriters. So it's just really complicated for them to pick. And that relevant, timely offers, customized, and can be unbundled is fine, from our experience.
And Richard,
a slightly different perspective is one of our clients is actually an insurance broker, and they deal with business insurance. And in that environment, I think offering bundling and unbundling is actually something that the clients really want. But the trickiness there arises around the advice model. So where we've spent a lot of time is looking into the questions you can ask, the questions you can't ask. And obviously you've got to be careful around how much arm twisting goes into the conversation, which obviously is an important area. So that's where, again, voice analytics helps, speech analytics, because you can actually make sure that you're compliant and that when a bundled product is sold, it's understood, and as you say, the complexity is explained, and someone's getting what they need, not what the broker wants to sell them.
Great. Okay, couple of minutes left. I think we've got time to take any questions from the audience if there are any. It's hard to see actually with the lights and the sun dipping. Anyone have any questions for the panel? Yep, there's one here. Can you just grab the mic if you don't mind? Thank you.
Yeah, great panel. Thank you so much. Embedded insurance question. Do you find that many of the potential partners want to provide their customers with quotes from different insurers to compare options? And how do you kind of handle that situation?
Yes, quite a lot. I mean, most of the partners, I'm sure you've got perspective here, most of the partners will be thinking about sort of 3 strategies. Do we want to offer like a really truly embedded, tailored protection offer for that user experience? Do we offer a standalone product where someone would come and on their website and navigate to the insurance tab? Or do they want to offer a marketplace? Those are general kind of conversations we've had. In our experience of doing quite a lot of those, what we found is the embedded play just delivers a much better experience and also just a greater return on investment. And often when they've kind of set up these standalone websites and sort of tabs, they've shut them down because the embedded solution, as you can imagine, solves a real problem. Like it's a trigger point, it's a customized protection offer that's tailored for me, I trust that brand, and it's a convenient experience. And so, yeah, we've often done multiple and then reverted back to the embedded because it solves that particular use case for that. But look, I mean, you know, there are marketplace insurers. Well, of course, that's what people go to do comparison shopping. But also think, you know, when you embed insurance, you're not going to cater for every single person on that website, right? Not every single person will attach that, because that person's looking for a convenient product at that particular time. There might be a very price-sensitive person who's going to go to a marketplace and do that. You're not going to get 100% attach rates. So we try and cater for that, price accordingly. That's our experience. I'm not too sure how you think about it.
We currently don't offer a marketplace solution, but as I mentioned, we do use aggregators for one of our go-to-market brands, and we find that very effective. But in terms of our partnerships, we're very similar. Embedded is definitely a referrer partnership program that we have, and then we also do have like the Boopers of the world and Telstra, where we will have a bespoke offering for them, where they will have their unique GI offering that is standalone, but it's obviously embedded within their logins and PHI holdings, for example. So we integrate deeply, even if the purchase journey isn't embedded.
I think we're out of time, aren't we, Luke?
Yeah, I think we'll have to park the questions there, but please make use of the networking time afterwards. If you have more questions for the team, please thank our panel. Well done, guys.